My name is Ryan Braun, and this is the Born Again Homesteader podcast. Welcome to the Born Again Homesteader podcast, where our goal is to help you cut through the weeds as we build a more self-sufficient life. I'm your host, Ryan Braun, and let's dive into this episode titled, What is Homesteading? So we're going to take episode 1 and go into a quick history lesson on the Homesteading Act and how I feel homesteading has evolved from the frontiersmen of the 1800s into the modern homesteading revolution, and begin to tell you where my journey into homesteading has led me. So let's start by going back, way back, to May 1st, 1862 to be exact. On that day, President Abraham Lincoln signed into law the Homestead Act of 1862. That act granted more than 270 million acres of land while that was in effect. That 270 million acres equated to 10% of all of the U.S. lands. That is a lot. And as someone who is looking for just a couple acres, maybe you're looking for, your quarter, your half, or a full acre, maybe 5, 10, 15. 270 million acres is incredible. That 270 million acres equated to 10% of all U.S. lands. And according to the statement from the National Archives, on January 1st, 1863, Daniel Freeman made the first claim under the Act, which gave citizens or future citizens up to 160 acres of public land, provided that they live on it, improve it, and pay a small registration fee. By 1934, over 1.6 million homestead applications were processed and passed into the hands of individuals. A little over 100 years after the passage of the Homestead Act of 1862, the passage of the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976 repealed the Homestead Act in the 48 contiguous states, but did grant a 10-year extension on claims in Alaska. So nowadays we can't, obviously, you take advantage of the Homesteading Act. But let's rewind just a second there. 160 acres per citizen, per application. That's insane. For me to just trying to process that 160 acres, and the fact that 1.6 million people had processed, that's a lot by 1934. So yes, we're talking 79 years, but that's a lot of people who took advantage of this. Now, all this information I've just said to you is from the National Archives. I'm going to have a quote in the show notes linking to this statement from the National Archives website, archives.gov. So, while that's not where homesteading got its start, that concept on its own has existed for millennia, just under a different name, for living, surviving. But this is how the U.S. formalized homesteading as part of the Western expansion. As the years went by and our society started to modernize and grow into tighter communities, we stopped farming, we used the space for houses and shopping centers, and so on. Farms on their own grew larger and became more commercial, but there's always been some form of homesteading and self-sufficiency going on throughout the country. Groups like Mormons have pantries completely stocked with, as part of their faith in action. Survivalists, preppers, want to be ready for anything life throws at them, whether it be weather, government, or zombie-related. Extreme environmentalists may only eat the berries that have fallen from the bush because, if you pluck them from the branch and eat them, it's just murderous. Okay, that was a bit much. Let's look at today and see how homesteading has evolved into smaller spaces in homes like the windowsills of apartment dwellers to the backyards of suburbanites. People have converted small spaces to grow their own food and create small food plots and planter boxes in their own yards, even taking it as far as creating food forests to limit their need for commercially grown food, while also taking further control of their own health by knowing exactly what is in the food they're eating and lowering their impact on the environment by reducing the fuel and emissions by having less food trucked throughout the country. So my wife and I don't have our land for our homestead just yet. We're working on that, trying to find the right piece. But however, we've decided that this is a life that we want to live, and until we get the chance to purchase our land and begin our desired homestead, we decided to make use of some parts of the home that we have now. We wanted to take advantage of what little yard we had and create a test bed of sorts for what I feel are two options people can take to dip their toes into a more self-sufficient life. First, we got chickens, 8 to be exact, and we turned the lean-to on our shed into a coop and run. And now a lean-to, if you're not familiar with this, it's just kind of an extension of the roof that has support posts, and it's open area. Usually you use it for storing your lawnmower or maybe some firewood or some just outdoor stuff that you don't mind if it gets cold or wet. But we closed that in, and I'll get into more detail what we learned as new chicken owners and how we chose our birds, how we made our coop, and the lessons we learned in another episode. So I'll make it specifically for the chickens. I'm not saying that you have to do this, though. My thoughts are that they are a good opportunity to get used to caring for livestock. They provide nutritious eggs, and we make a few dollars selling excess to farmers markets and the local farm-to-table store. And in fact, we've gotten so many right now. My wife has decided to donate to the local food pantry. So we're kind of just spreading it out a little bit, giving back, but also trying to recoup some costs and help pay for our animals. Again, you don't have to start with this to be more self-sufficient. Maybe you live somewhere you don't have the space or simply can't have them, and that's okay. There's more than one road to a self-sufficient life. Next, we built a garden with a hoop house. What is a hoop house, you might ask? Well, it's a greenhouse-like covering that we use to help our garden grow more efficiently in our climate. Yes, I'm being very vague, I know, but I'll tell you this, it works. And yes, just like the chickens, I'll have everything we've done and learned in its own episode coming up soon. Spoiler alert, we're already changing the design for next year. As you can see, I'm personally, or as you can hear, I should say, I am personally embedded in this learning phase of this. So then, who am I, and what makes me think that I should have a podcast on a topic that I myself am so green to? Well, as the saying goes, misery loves company. Okay, I'm just kidding. What really led me here was one thing that kept coming up as my wife and I were doing the research, is that there are so many different avenues to obtain the knowledge in homesteading, but so many of them can take it to an extreme, or even get political. Don't ask me how that happens, but it does. I don't know how or why, but some people wish to inject politics. I'm sure you've been looking for it too, I just want to bring it to every person's perspective. Basically, this show is taking preppers, legacies and family farms, Mormons, environmentalists, survivalists, minimalists, empty nesters who want to change their life approach, former hippies, and turning it down from 11 to 5. Don't get me wrong, you still need to be all in regardless of your desired level of homesteading. It is so much of what my wife and I talk about anymore. You could say we've been born again into this lifestyle. Well, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for listening to the Born Again Homesteader podcast. I hope you'll click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and tune into the next episode where we'll dive into self-reliance and self-sufficiency. So from my homestead to yours, good night and good luck.